I'm here to negotiate. He really lost his patience. He repeated the name to make sure it wasn't nonsense, and I pulled my tongue out. His mouth was squeezed so painfully that he could still squeeze out the words, the star of history. Lee Jian frowned in displeasure. The day before, the Gemini also pointed to the historical woman. Was it really done by the female historian? There was still the short sword that stabbed him in the Devil's Tower. Lee Jian remembered that he needed to go back to Jin Min's appraisal shop to see what the results were before coming to a conclusion. So he stopped talking about it and instead asked for the hammer to bestow his achievements. As soon as he saw the old goat's unwillingness, Jian roared, "Why don't you pay whatever you like?" Scared the hell out of him. Who would dare not pay? Jian finally held the hammer he had missed for so many years in his hands. Knowing clearly that Sergeyevich was extremely upset because the hammers were snatched away, Jian didn't care at all. He summoned 3 gods to hand over this stupid old man to them, and kindly advised them to resist. So if any limb showed signs of anger, they could just break it off. Once or twice. Don't care much about the punishment. As soon as he saw the trio of gods, Sergeyevich screamed, "How could you call the guardian angel?" Being caught up in the portal of transmission and the bitter voice of Capricorn still echoing, "You are not the star of the zodiac." But he basically doesn't care at all about what people say about him. Now let this old goat go first to question his conscience. Behind him, the group of beasts that were no longer under control crawled up, holding their aching heads. The surrounding beach was full of signs of chaotic fighting, but there was no one explained everything. They all woke up in the joy of Steven and Yuha, plus the worry of the other troops. Are you awake yet? Guys, don't go crazy anymore. People are afraid. The group of Capricorns were all in an uproar. The star leader was taken away right before their eyes. What should they do? What else can we do? Where did the leader find the activation button? He gritted his teeth and said that he had to do it until the end. Guys, the armor worn by the other legions suddenly glowed in the terrifying light. They exploded like a bunch of grenades. The leader crowed as loudly as his Capricorn master, boasting that whoever used the tools of my zodiac star would be ready to return to the grave and return to dust. Just to let them tell him to pull headlines to make them likable. The other guy scowled at his subordinate Bayoka, the guinea pig, aiming at the guy who took his star master away. Li Jian looked at the silly toy that was flying, grumbling and asking why the 3 little kids also named this and that guinea pig so tiredly. As soon as he held the hammer in his hand, the status window jumped up and down, reporting that the hammer could actually hit the transformed target. With a smile on his face, Jian immediately identified the guinea pig bullet, immediately hammered the bong and made it become the leader of the guinea pig fireworks, exploding and flying into the sky. Damn, is this guy crazy? Turning quality bullets into explosive fireworks for fun at home. That's not all. The big beast man's feet stomped hard on the ground. Steven and the herd of beast men growled madly to see who was stronger among the Capricorns who specialized in playing dirty with beast men. Just as he was about to call the 3 brats to stuff them, they all ran away and no one dared to stop and let Steven beat them to a pulp. So the big guy turned on Jian and asked him to find him a toy that was big and sturdy, fit well in his hands, and was easy to swing to punch those guys to death. Just as he was about to refuse, his eyes widened when he realized that Steven seemed to be big and sturdy, with a good hand and easy to throw. He flashed a smile that was 1 part prestigious and 9 parts bad at Steven. The teacher keeps making mistakes, but I don't know where they are wrong. His entire muscular body was yanked away. A majestic scream echoed in the blue sky. Steven was sent flying twice in the air by Jian, then hit the ground hard and rolled close to the feet of the group of crawling Capricorns. Run. A powerful bounce. I threw up a bunch of people who no longer had armor. But the owner of that throw was very excited. Why don't we go bowling tomorrow? He grabbed the god's ankle and smiled, asking him how he felt. His eyes fell on the black leg full of disgusting dirt and pointed it straight at his face. Jian suddenly lost interest. He stared at the true power diary as if assessing it, then decided to let go and become a human. Well, in general, this thing is big and sturdy. But it doesn't fit in your hand very well. Probably won't happen twice. The outskirts of the Western Defense Zone of the Alliance of European countries in the Red Zone have been invaded by disaster. The city scene looked desolate. Tentacles of disaster like tree roots wrapped around high-rise buildings, scattered among the rubble. There was an extremely foul smell everywhere, and a dark red mist enveloped the space, bringing a horrifying feeling of death. Following Zen, the leader of the search team of the female constellation, are members with the same mission of searching for missing people in the temporary settlement suburbs. As soon as they gathered, some members started talking about the news of Li Jian defeating the disastrous octopus in the Philippines. Mostly, they praised Li Jian for being so extraordinary, and those who officially participated in the expedition didn't do much in the end. Plus there was a huge fight between both Leo and Capricorn. Both of them looked like losers as a backdrop for that 13th saint. Sen turned around unhappy, saying nonsense when going on a mission or going out. The whole group immediately solemnly behind him received the order and began to track down the missing people in the area to quickly find them. The red mist that suddenly came along with the distant cry for help made the whole crowd nauseous. Sen turned his eyes towards the source of the sound, determined that it was coming from the darkness where the fog was spreading quickly, and led the team of 6 people in a straight line. As he went deeper inside, the screams for help became more and more frequent. But after running a while, Zen began to realize something was unusual. All those screams came from the city center area. It feels like a machine repeating itself. Or more accurately, like a recording desk. He braked and immediately turned around to order everyone to stop. But at this moment everyone behind him had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a dark scene full of tree root-shaped tentacles, hiding in Zen's muffled calls for his comrades. The tentacles now began to move everywhere, from buildings or on main roads, moving and heading towards Zen. Just as I was confused, I suddenly heard a cry for help from behind, identical to the one that had brought me here. Zen turned his head to look back, his eyes filled with horror, realizing who was asking for help. It was clear that the disaster's trick was to imitate the tone of the person who lured the team. That plaintive sound became more and more monstrous, accompanied by the giggles of scary faces. Zen's throat was wrapped tightly and his whole body was engulfed in thorny tentacles. He and his entire team were trapped in the belly of the disaster-level disaster that had been missing for so long. At the Sagittarius Star Sanctuary, there was still a crack in the roof that hadn't been patched yet. Li Jian was sitting cross-legged on a table filled with newspapers talking about his recent events. As soon as the TV mentioned his name, he immediately glanced over and saw nothing but the dozens of tragic body recoveries in the Philippine Sea. Listening to his praise over and over again, he returned to his Bible because he was tired of killing only one octopus and making noise for several days. There are no plans to open an association like those other zodiac stars. But basically, this Bible will make what Li Jian does become a hot topic for people to discuss. Enough of seeing this. Now we have to start properly handling the things that have been left behind. As soon as I closed the sacred book, the system immediately displayed a new notice board with 2 options, Test 6 and Skill Increase 1. With plenty of power now, the elegant Li Jian reached into Test Box 6 to see what happened. A long board with the title Ophiuchus's Awakening appeared before my eyes. Inform him that the 3 trials will begin when the Sapphire Star reaches level 10. Rewards include Ophiuchus's unique magic spell, increased physical abilities and awakening skills, and a bonus Ophiuchus Holy Relic as a gift. Total implementation time is 10 days. Failure will result in a penalty. While Li Jian was pondering, the system began detailing the 3 tests he needed to do. The first is a test of strength, requiring Li Jian to destroy a demon with the condition that he cannot use his war god instinct. Although it's a bit boring because I can't use the ultimate skill. But thinking about it, as long as it's not a direct confrontation with a god or a disaster level It's still okay. The real issue that concerned him were the requirements of the remaining 2 trials. The intelligence test requires Lee Jian to recruit a secretary to record Ophiuchus's execution orders. The other wanted him to accept a human servant as a disciple. Rubbing his smooth chin, Lee Jian was more used to dealing with disasters than working with people. Where should I go to find disciples and secretaries? Putting this aside for now, he clicked on the skill increase box 1 to see if there was anything. Moreover, his eyes emitted light rays like a projector. Because the skill of condensing the mind had clearly increased in level. Un Yerin was grabbing Yang Wei's neck and was about to clean it. Jian's yelling made her stop and look over. This 13th zodiac animal suddenly jumped out and suddenly wanted to stop so she could take a look. The blue light seemed to shine on both objects in front of us, showing that the percentage of faith in the different star constellations was truly virtual. The system kindly reminded Jian to look for a disciple who has 100% faith in his family's star snake. Otherwise his strength will decrease. Don't blame him. Counting the people who most likely had 100% faith in him, he saw Sung Jae, Yuha and their guy. Only Ta-Ek-Su is certain that hearing about the question of becoming a disciple will definitely cause psychological trauma. Contrary to Jian's humorous look, the centaur secretary said that the whole family of 3 had gone out since early morning. He was exhausted and had to think about it later. He was about to find something to do when his phone vibrated repeatedly. Seeing the caller's name, a dark smile immediately appeared on his face. Jin Myung really knows how to keep time. He always calls when he needs to talk. The old scene was full of failed screams calling for help echoing in the air. People were lying around. People were trying to ask for help, causing chaos everywhere. Sung Jae's mother tried to calm her son from the screams outside. It was important to remind him 3 times. He must hide in the car until his father came. At that time, Sung Jae was just a scared kid with tears streaming down his face. He listened to his mother's instructions that when his father came, he would definitely give the monster a blow. His mother's smile appeared on her lips, holding out her little finger and telling her son to promise to be brave. But little did he know when the tentacle had already wrapped around his neck. The failed scream for mother 10 years ago seemed to come back to life in an instant, bringing back Sung Jae's fear. When he opened his eyes, it was all warm sunshine outside. But the pain still made him breathe heavily, his hands trembling as he clung to the armrest of the chair. Yuha placed both hands on the comforter, pulling her younger brother back to reality with a gentle smile. Ta-Ek-Su looked through the rearview mirror and asked about his son who looked tired. He couldn't sleep last night. Yuha knew it was a sequela of divine punishment. But his younger brother kept saying it was okay. It looked like it was still drowning in old sadness, combined with fatigue, so it was silent for a long time. Suddenly Yuha remembered she had something to give. So she reached into her bag, searched, and pulled out the birthday gift she had prepared in advance. The sparkling bracelet is something that contains the power of Gemini that Sung Jae has wanted for a long time. As expected, Yuha's younger brother returned to his happy state immediately. Giving a gentle smile, Yuha was glad that his younger brother liked him because every time on his birthday, Sung Jae looked like he was struggling, like he was addicted. Hearing the birthday greeting, he smiled happily. After all, today was the day to visit his mother, so he had to put a smile on his face. Ta-Ek-Su drove in silence, listening to the 2 kids talk, emotions making his fists clench on the steering wheel. A moment later, they arrived at the large hospital, where patient Chun Jiwoo's room 808 resounded with many stories that had happened recently. The whole family is a huge fan of Lee Jian, so Yuha knows her mother will love to hear stories about idols. Jiwoo plugged in the ventilator and lay there quietly without a single movement. Only the hand being held by Yuha still had warmth to know there was still life somewhere. Hugo bowed his head outside the glass door, hiding his sadness and not wanting his 2 children to know. The familiar phone vibrated and he felt both surprise and unhappiness. Stepping outside the hospital grounds, Hugo immediately said that today was an important day, so there was no work. But he didn't expect EU to call directly, so he had to answer the phone. As soon as he heard the message on the other end of the second that he needed to be entrusted to destroy the disaster, Hugo was puzzled and asked the star of history, who was in the Eastern Union, why he didn't call him back. Sagittarius Kai Tin, I wouldn't call you directly if it was just some general disaster. Furthermore, the female historian has already declared that she will not intervene. This information really makes it hard for Hugo to believe that Kevin Ajar actually gave up on a good match. It wasn't until he heard that it was a catastrophic disaster that happened in Korea 10 years ago and destroyed the entire airport that Hugo realized the other person was talking about the bloody incident that once caused a terrifying obsession and leaving his wife in a vegetable state for 10 years. Hugo heard its name again today. In Belgium, a country belonging to the European Union under the authority of the historian, it rained heavily all day long. Lee Jian hugged his glass and smiled, but he was bored and couldn't stand it. It's been raining for so many days. Why is it raining right? Why did he come like this? Pull out your phone and ask your nephew Sung Jae if he wants to be his disciple. The message jumped 3 times. In the end, Jian was rejected, much to Sung Jae's guilt. I really didn't expect that the boy who idolized me would refuse. But there were still many things he didn't know about the boy, especially when he asked about Sung Jae's birthday. Secretary Eun Yerin was embarrassed as if she didn't want to talk about it, making Jian speculate that maybe something happened on Sung Jae's birthday. The newcomer's voice calmly interrupted Jian's thoughts. Jin Myung took off his hat and politely greeted him before sitting opposite. It started with a polite sentence forcing him to go to faraway Belgium. But in fact he had Larry Queen's magical door, so moving across the terrain was simpler. Glancing out at the scene in the torrential rain, Jian told him that this country was clearly under the influence of the goddess of history. But wasn't it a bit too much to have flags and logos hanging everywhere? This is not strange to Myung. He calmly said that this Europe wears gods on its head to live. Since the gods appeared, the whole of Europe has become a theocracy. Shaking his head in another direction to see the protective shield under the blue sky, Myung replied that people here always believe that they are being protected. So it is understandable that their faith is getting stronger and stronger. Quote. Is that so? Jian lifted the glass of water and laughed. Jin Myung, while you use those beautiful words to talk about the supreme gods, your faith is decreasing quite a lot. The divine gaze skill focused on Myung, easily seeing that his faith in the female historian decreased from 92% to 87%, while his faith in the constellation of the servant reached 99.1%. Furthermore, he also saw that the reason the subject's faith was weakening was because he felt betrayed. Jin Myung's fanaticism decreased again, making Lee Jian guess that something very serious had happened. Thinking so, he immediately got to the main issue. Perhaps today's meeting was about faith? Jin Myung didn't hide it, but clicked his hand to release a whirlpool of water right above his head. The skill of creating a soundproof shield borrowed from Pisces can make both of you confide in each other without anyone detecting. While Lee Jian was admiring his top skills, the old appraiser searched his pocket and placed the dagger he gave him. He focused as soon as he heard Myung say he had read the remaining memories from inside the knife. The results showed that the perpetrator who stabbed Lee Jian in the demon waterfall was the saint of the female historian. The person Jin Myung served, Kevin Ajar. A few hours before leaving Hugo's house, Lee Jian told Larry Queen to find out why little Sung Jae still insisted on being a Gemini apostle. The last time he lost his faith and was tortured by Fraser's mother. There must have been a great reason for the boy to stay on this planet. He assigned Larry Queen to learn more about the duties of the Star Secretary before leaving. The empty house was quiet. Only the Goblin Queen sat playing games, planning to ask Yangwei about the secretary later while I tried to get to know Sung Jae. The right person at the right time as fate would have it. Sung Jay came to Larry Queen to ask her to help him with something. Inside she wanted to jump up and down. But on the outside she still acted like she didn't care. The gamer asked what he had to say. The little guy went straight to the question and said he needed a way from the Gemini Magic Library to the secret library. That was the top floor of the Gemini Magic Library, where many forbidden spells were hidden that only allowed high-ranking apostles to enter. With the title of A-level apostle as before, Sung Jae should have been able to enter the library. But that day he personally threw away the Kai Tin badge. In addition, A-level did not have the right to go into the secret library. So, over and over again, he still bowed to Larry Queen and asked her to help him. As soon as the girl's hand touched the air, the space-time door opened and immediately saw the bookshelves of the Gemini library. Helping Sung Jae cross the barrier was not difficult, but Larry Queen had to ask the reason. Because the boy wanted to enter the secret library where lost spells and forbidden spells were kept. After hesitating for a few seconds, Sung Jae finally decided to say that he wanted to go to the library to find a soul-invoking skill that would allow him to summon life from the other world. Jian, dressed all in black, sat silently on a bench in the middle of the foggy Belgian city. His face tense, recalling Myung's words. That records from a few years ago showed that similar daggers were always auctioned publicly and always appraised by his predecessor. Myung thought his predecessor had sensed the dark energy on the knife. Tried to find its origin before him. First reaffirming that this knife truly belonged to the historical woman. Or to be more precise, this is one of many weapons in the women's arsenal. Above, Myung showed off an old photo and said he thought the display and auction was just a slow and discreet method of destroying traces of the knife. If my predecessor was still alive, Myung would have gone to ask. But he was suddenly murdered while investigating the origin of the knife and was even stabbed by it. With his expertise, Myung knew that someone had tried to eliminate the source. Dark energy and adds an extremely powerful curse. Even though the curse is fading over the years, it was clearly created to counteract the power of people like Lee Jian. So strong that it could harm not only saints but also the highest gods. Right? He absent-mindedly thought about that conclusion. Tried to kick the evil Crab Morin, who specializes in using curse spells, but had to dismiss it himself. No matter how good that guy is, he can't make some supreme divine curses. Dark energy does not come from gods. And the power of cancer is nothing compared to the energy source on that knife. Thinking that the source of the disaster was still a secret, Jian thought that maybe the dog who stabbed him had a connection to the dark side of the earth. But that was still just personal speculation. He suppressed his boredom and turned his attention to the test missions because they had limited hours. After that, I'll deal with the historian. I've been preparing for a while. The sound of the loudspeaker announcing that the train was entering the station brought Lee Jian back to reality. He excitedly watched the steam train approaching and then stopping completely. The group of apostles walked out the first door of the train. Among the crowd of ordinary people, uniforms like hunters walking in groups with different temperaments that made everyone turn their heads and look strangely. A group of more than a dozen apostles got off the train and lined up, waiting for the last person to appear amid the buzz of the surrounding people. Lee Jian seemed to be waiting for that person. As soon as he saw him, he smiled his trademark smile. All the elite Centaur troops were present, and he waited for the blonde-haired team leader to confide a few words. Under the blue curtain of the historian, in the area that had been occupied by disasters for many years, there was the rumbling sound of all kinds of fire bullets being fired at the damn birds. The fire burned brightly, bringing with it several feathered carcasses falling before our eyes. The sound of the group of people cheering together to deal with all of this group. Then they spread out, each taking care of their own business. On the ground there were all kinds of obstacles, especially the tree roots of whatever the hell was hooking into the soldier's leg, which was a topic for Jian to talk about. Listening to him ask where the star of history holds the cluster. Why do soldiers and horses appear here? Gats frowned and said it was commissioned by the historian. The Star Centaur always received orders to destroy disasters with his elite army like mercenaries. The Planet Lord has now gone to meet with people from the European Union government to hear a more detailed explanation of the situation. Jian raised his eyebrows and wanted to ask why this group of people accepted a job that was unclear to them. The army commander turned around and told him that Taek-su accepted the job as soon as he heard the story because the subject was directly related to him. Looking at him seriously, Gats asked Jian if he had ever heard of the monster that craves the power of the gods called Blood Mist. Taek-su arrived at the disaster response headquarters of the European Union government's parliament and was immediately introduced to the Blood Task, which likes to spread bone membranes to eat creatures and souls near it. It has been appearing for 10 days now. Why don't you gather the forces of the guilds to take charge of it, instead of secretly finding someone to solve it privately like this? Responding to Taek-su, the other person replied that the bloody incident had been declared destroyed by the diplomatic agency. So how could its appearance be widely announced? Asking him if the government maintains such a view even though it has eaten more than 5,000 people. Taek-su only receives a helpless smile. Over the past decades, the total number of deaths has been nothing more or less. Taek-su wanted to know why the female historian Kevin Ajar did not show up and received a quite reasonable answer. That the female historian's side had mobilized their forces several times. All of them were high-ranking. But all of them had died. Because the blood-red blindness caused by the blood mist caused everyone to fall into an abnormal state without resistance. For female historians who only favor close combat, it's really like offering prey to monsters. Also, coincidentally, Kevin is currently dealing with a red-level disaster in another area. So he can't return in time. After surveying many stars of the zodiac, they chose the Centaur, which was famous for its mercenary team, so that it would not be affected by issues such as interests or politics. In addition, everyone knows that the Centaur is very close to Jian, the scene of solving the thousand-legged disaster in the Philippine Sea, convincing them to invite Taek-su to solve this problem. That friendly smile in his eyes was just a lie. It was all a scenario devised by the Alliance to deceive him. The self-righteous Kevin Ajar will be beaten to death if he dies. He won't rely on other forces to solve the problems of his holy land. But according to another hypothesis, could it be that the female historian intended to take advantage of the blood mist to deal with Jian and herself? Taek-su was not happy when they openly set a trap like that. But it was his hand on the chair that was clenching in fighting, making the nearsighted man cry out nervously. When they tried to tell Kevin that they were afraid that the Centaurs and Jian wouldn't play this game, he laughed and said that, as long as they emphasized the blood mist, Hugo Atherts certainly couldn't ignore it, because that disaster had harmed the lady. Far away in Belgium, the commander of the Centaur force explained the same answer that made Taek-su accept this mission. Jian crossed his arms in confusion. Who is the lady this guy is talking about? He slowly explained that she was Chun Jiwoo, the wife of the Star Master and the mother of his friends' 2 children. The two met after Jian was locked in the Demon Tower, so he never knew his friend's wife. A girl, said Lotus. In order to protect her and Sung Jae, the first saint of the Sagittarius star, also met with trouble. Jian knew that person. The kid Lee Jae-won kept walking behind him and his friend from 20 years ago. However, Jian himself did not expect the reason why. His friend always hid every time he talked about his family. He hadn't seen the blood mist yet, so he didn't know what it looked like, but he guessed its appearance made Taek-su really dirty. Confident that he is the one who understands Taek-su's strength the best because he personally taught him how to fight. Jian cannot believe that his friend can fall so easily. In the past, when the two of them were still fighting, Taek-su was the only person he allowed to fight back-to-back with him. In addition to absolute trust, in the past when it came to the 12 zodiac stars, Jian could firmly conclude that his friend was the strongest among them. So he asked the kids to explain more about what Taek-su had encountered. Luckily, they agreed. If it was someone else, They probably wouldn't have said it because the sad memory from 10 years ago happened on his 7th birthday. Sung Jae, the red-haired boy, was dozing off, waiting for his mother to talk to his father on the phone, showing off that he was about to successfully create a weapon to destroy a great disaster. Big things in the eyes of a child are just nonsense. Only when Jiwon patted his head and praised his son for coming to the airport to pick up his mother in the early morning did Sung Jae rub his eyes with joy. Jaewon woke up early to take the young master to meet the lady. While smiling comfortably, Sung Jae yawned and said he was hungry. Jaewon took on the task of buying food for his son. So Sung Jae looked behind him and saw two strangers trying to lower their voice to a whisper. They blamed each other for letting something out and then ran away together to escape death. But Sung Jae was too young to understand and didn't tell his mother anything. The airport lights suddenly turned off, making Jaewoon nervously stand up and look around. Even though the entire airport system was so large, the power went out. The passengers were confused, and Jaewoon and her mother didn't know what to do. The strange noise and loss of light caused Jaewon, who was buying food, to rush out to find his wife and mother. His eyes met the horrifying scene of the disaster looking straight at Jaewoon. Not knowing anything, he smiled and asked Jaewon, "Is something big going on?" The newly purchased food package fell to the floor. Jaewon used all his strength to rush over, wanting to catch Jaewoon and his mother, who were thrown away when the unfortunate child broke down the door and rushed in with its mouth full of teeth. With all his speed, Jaewon successfully pushed Jaewoon and his mother back, but in return he fell towards the creature's wide mouth. Sung Jae saw his close uncle fall to death with his own eyes. He cried fiercely in his mother's arms but could do nothing. Only Jaewon's eyes could be seen in the image of his uncle with nothing but a smile before falling into his full mouth, becoming one of the most horrifying images of Sung Jae's childhood. Jaewoon painfully covered the boy's eyes, trying to hide his eyes between tears, but it was too late. Puyat Vap looked like a frog that had just kicked a delicious bowl of vermicelli. It hummed with satisfaction, scaring the passengers and people in the airport to death. The scene where it just swallowed someone officially opened the mukbang scene without ending, seeing its tentacles wriggling as if they wanted to feed. Again, the guards rushed to contact the church immediately. As soon as Jaewoon and his mother landed, they had to witness dozens of people being carried away by tentacles. The whole space was filled with pitiful screams that wanted to drown out the reminder to their son, "No matter what, don't please let go of me." Jaewoon hugged Sung Jae, gritted his teeth and used all his strength to try to run out of the reach of the tentacles. The entire large airport was soon left with only a thick layer of dust and smoke, filled with pitiful screams and motionless bodies whose souls had been taken away. Sung Jae's memories from 5 to 7 years old to 17 years old were unforgettable. His mother stretched out her hand and reminded him not to get out of the car until his father arrived. With tears in his eyes, little Sung Jae couldn't move. He could only silently listen to his mother tell him to wait for his father to get there. His mother looked so radiant at that moment, but tears fell. A second later, Sung Jae could not let her down even if Sung Jae screamed until his throat was hoarse. Drowning in regret, Sung Jae just wanted to pick up his mother to celebrate her birthday together. It had been a long time since the whole family had been together. The boy cried endlessly, mumbling apologies, which soon caused the tentacles to crawl towards the car. Suddenly, golden light flashed from the dark sky, dazzling my eyes. The arrow filled with fire stabbed straight into the ground, not far from the car, burning the animals, and then Taek-soo's whole body was on fire, screaming at Sung Jae. "Are you okay?" The little boy seemed to grab a straw to save his life. He leaned forward and looked at his father, who was still wearing house clothes and no sandals, while the cattle hadn't yet crawled over. Taek-soo turned around in panic and asked his son if he was injured anywhere. Who would have thought that when he heard that, pain came out of his mouth. His body stiffened, trying to hold the bow and not let it fall. Raising his helpless hand, Taek-soo leaned against the glass door to comfort his child and his heart. Because even Jaewon did not survive. The ring of fire swirled on the ground where Taek-soo stood. And every tentacle that approached was burned to ashes, eyes fiery, teeth gnashed with anger. The star centaur turned around and roared. How dare you! Taek-soo jumped up high and saw the whole scene of the huge, ugly disaster carrying a giant tree on its back full of strange round blocks. Guessing that the people it killed were all locked up here, Taek-soo quickly looked everywhere and found Jaewon with his head down among them. Anger burned in my heart. But I had to remind myself to stay calm and think that maybe my wife was still alive, as long as I could find a way to force her out. There was still hope. Landing on the head of the ugly bastard, aiming straight at the place where Jiwoo was trapped, Taek-soo put all his strength into his empty hands, trying to separate the nonsense tree roots that were hugging his wife. The fire flared up, embracing the skin of Taek-soo, who was anxious to save his wife, moving into the trees and gradually reaching the blood mist's brain, making it realize that someone was using different energy on its head. Another tentacle appeared right after and harassed Taek-soo. He angrily threw a fire in that direction but suddenly stopped when he saw two faces crying pitifully. On that mouth, a human voice begged for help. They approached Taek-soo and groaned, making him lose his guard for a second. The tentacle of disaster could not be ignored. It hit Taek-soo's side hard, curling up his arms and legs and laughing happily. Its disgusting mouth smiled happily. You are the one who received the delicious power of the god. It swallowed saliva greedily, piercing dozens of tentacles into Taek-soo's body, trying to suck out the centaur's energy piece by piece. The pain caused by the withdrawal of his power made him scream in agony. And even Sung Jae's son in the car who witnessed it couldn't bear to scream. The boy was helpless until another golden light appeared in the sky, straight at the poor boy's head, and the surrounding rocks cracked and shot into the sky. That energy continued to pour down and burn down the tentacles holding Taek-soo, destroying the giant trees that exposed the bubbles holding the humans inside. Someone hovering above yelled at Sung Jae's father. What's with this pitiful state? It was Hae-jin who squeezed a ball and spoke up to rescue the people trapped in the tree. She had just lowered herself down with Stephen Marker and Yangwei, holding a cigarette and observing the situation below. Taek-soo weakly braced himself on the ground, not understanding why this group was here. The woman's high-heeled foot placed down firmly as if to answer. The cancer saint Haley looked down at him with a cold expression. He opened his mouth and asked if it was okay, then helped Taek-soo stand up. I heard there was a very strong calamity, so I gathered everyone I could. They wanted to help because no one wanted a bloody fog to appear in their territory. Standing in front of the two of them were three saints in fighting mode, wanting to quickly fight and go home to sleep. Hae-jin threw up rocks and dirt to form a mass of energy. Yangwei used the spade skill to summon dozens of sharp swords and Stevens' thunderous punch was all discharged straight towards the squatting disaster. But the confidence of all three disappeared like a stream of power swallowed by a monster. So much so that Taek-soo himself had to be stunned for a long time when he saw it. That mouth closed, causing the three saints to quickly retreat, panicking and asking each other what the hell was happening, to swallow the attack. Furthermore, the wounds on its body seemed to recover at breakneck speed thanks to receiving energy. The frog's eyes fluttered. The weight, when it stood up, shattered the ground. Steven shouted at Hae-jin, needing her to cast the barrier immediately, just in time as the tentacles were fiercely attacking them. Hundreds of hardened tentacles rushed towards the saint, accompanied by a frog's hissing sound. It doesn't care who or what it is. It uses its tentacles to flatten the entire area within its reach. Hae-jin's eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding profusely due to overexertion. Her barrier was visibly weakening due to the fierce attack from the calamity. The hand that releases the scales of justice is also the time when the vine skill of the golden rule is deployed. The saint's form of the zodiac star braced itself to bear the weight of the two scales that appeared right above the beast's head, temporarily restraining it for a while. The saint who had just appeared asked the three people floating above with an unhappy voice. Libra's Cecil Lawrence in his demigod form reminded him not to be confused by the disaster. She's a person who doesn't socialize much. So why did Haley call? She said she didn't know. She just saw that Theen Bin coming here was definitely not for a walk. Several vines constricted the creature as it tried to struggle, pinning it to the ground, blocking its movement for a while. She turned and said, "Hey Jin, quickly use the teleportation technique on this monster. Don't you see how it swallows its attacks? Right now, he can't win. And he won't be able to swallow his power like the centaur just now." Hearing the loud sound of his vines being torn apart, Cecil quickly suggested transferring the disaster to the underground or molten lava flow. Gemini is still in the dark. Tomorrow it will appear again, but Libra doesn't care. Taek Su shouted to stop immediately. That monster swallows human souls. Those people are just empty corpses. We need to defeat it and bring their souls back. More than anyone else, Jiwoo was one of them. The centaur quickly spoke up, asking everyone to help him take it down. He was panting but still stubbornly said he could still fight. His wife, who longed to see her child, had not yet awakened, and could not give up hope. Cecil looked silently for a moment as if thinking. But it didn't last for many seconds. His red eyes flashed brightly, sending away a few more seconds. She had reached her limit and could hardly hold on any longer. So she shouted at Hyzen to ask her to immediately use the teleportation technique. The blood fog opened its mouth again and howled, preparing to attack. Again, Hyzen had no choice but to use the teleportation skill as Cecil said. Oh, Taek Su roared in pain. Quickly stopped. The only hope of saving his wife was still there. But Hyzen did not revoke the skill. The energy in her hand flared up white and successfully moved the frog. That day was the day Hugo Arthurs was severely criticized. Only the saints who sent children of disaster into the unknown are praised. They responded to the press as usual, while Sagittarius, the protector of Korea, was under fierce criticism from the public. Interviewees openly attacked Sagittarians for not being able to protect their own families. He is an incompetent person who should not be trusted. Hugo Arthurs had to publicly apologize that day and visit the memorial to the victims. Standing in the rain all day, public opinion continued to criticize harshly. The curses and shouts of the victims' families echoed behind them. Their aggressive attitudes seemed to tear them apart. But Hugo did not reply a word. Stephen bitterly cursed the son of a bitch and turned it off. It was so excruciating that he couldn't watch anymore. Yang Wei smirked. I think it's fun to watch. Stephen and Sophie each spoke out against the story of overpressing the centaurs. But in Yang Wei's eyes, it was a natural thing. The people needed someone to take responsibility. But in his selfish mind, he only wanted this Skaldun to grow bigger and bigger so it could easily expand its power. Laughter erupted from the stairs as a person holding a glass of strong drink in his hand joked. Stephen Marker took a photo yesterday and smiled brightly. But today his conscience is starting to tickle him. Ivan Kruger, the Taurus saint, laughed at the fact that poor centaurs were criticized as a matter of course. That guy with a dark face and a dark face laughed happily. If that guy is capable, why does he need other saints' help? From behind it sounded correct. But Morin's words were only heavier. You have to tell the truth that centaur is trash. Now, he has been robbed of half of his strength by the bloodstorm. The two boys howled with laughter, making Stephen and Sophie so annoyed that they dragged each other outside, unable to sit and listen any longer. After this, Hugo definitely won't be okay. And neither of you know what to do. But more importantly, I thought you must be very happy. You're normally very jealous of Jihu. Why are you reacting so strangely? Acting sulky. Sophie said she still hates Jihu but doesn't want bad things like that so happened to her. So the two fell into contemplation. What had just happened was bad, but there was no going back. But most of all, Stephen knew that no one was more sad than the children. Especially Sung Jae. who had to see his parents fall into this situation with his own eyes. Under the heavy rain, 3 people of the Zodiac Centaur walked between 2 wings of reporters waiting to hunt for news. His mouth told Hugo to share some of his feelings. But every question went deeper and asked if he felt guilty. He bowed his head and walked away, ignoring the microphone pointing at his face. Hugo did not answer a word, even saying that all the victims were taken to Thien Yet Hospital to cover up the truth. The Centaur president simply announced that Hugo would explain everything at the press conference, and then the 3 disappeared behind the iron door. Still not looking up, Taek Soo asked where Yerin Jaewon was. He was transferred to the hospital but in the latest group. Before the disaster encountered him, it vomited up victims that could not be washed away. Hearing Yerin express regret for saving the last captain, Taek Soo simply said to remember to transfer him to this hospital. Because Thien Yet lent him, and couldn't stand this indifferent attitude anymore. Yerin shouted that you don't have to take all the blame on yourself. You yourself lost your family and fought to the end with the disaster. Why did you stay silent and not tell the world what happened? Finally received Taek Soo's answer that there was indeed a way to save the victims and the bloodshed. But how would their families want to hear that their family members were not dead? Only their souls were taken away. Saying what needs to be done is